Hello, everybody. This is Pimpine News Network. In our today's program, I am hosting Dr. Trevor Trueman. Dr. Trevor Trueman is an esteemed human rights advocate. He's based in the United Kingdom, and he has been working with the human rights of the Oromo people and has been reporting on the Oromo human rights since the 1990s, and it's more than 30 years now. And he's really very committed and very persistent, and has been reporting on the Oromo human rights situation for more than 3 decades now. So, in our today's program, we'll be discussing about the Oromia Support Group recent report on the human rights situation under the current government of Ethiopia. Welcome, Dr. Trevor, and thank you very much for taking your time early morning this today and speaking with Symphony News Network. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm sorry, I was a little delayed.
It's okay. Then I didn't really get the time different. I thought we were about 8 hours apart, but it's about 9 hours.
No, it's 8 hours. I just did my calculations wrong, and I apologize. I thought it was 6 a.m., but it was going to be 5. So anyway.
Well, so let's go ahead and then discuss about your recent report about the human rights situation and the current human rights situation in Oromia. In your Oromia Support Group report number 68, you reported that the Ethiopian government has killed more than 156 Oromo civilians, along with the Fano Amara militants. Um, I think that this report came out in around the beginning of this year, but like it took more than a month for us to catch up and speak with you. And also, you reported that you recently published on your website. So uh, the situation is almost has continued. The Ethiopian government continues to murder civilians. In the last couple of weeks, the Ethiopian government has conducted extrajudicial killings of a mother and her two daughters and another neighbor, a young girl in her teens, and such kind of executions continues from day to day. Um, Basically, after you have concluded your report, this killing continues as even today. And my first question is, what was your finding? What was the pattern? What did you observe from your report? And also, is that number under the current regime, or is a total since you started reporting that under the Abiy Ahmed regime, the Prosperity Party of Ethiopia, that more than 6,156 people have been killed? And so that's my first question. And then um, yeah, so what is your main findings? What are the pattern that you observe, and what is the Ethiopian government achieving from executing civilians, and is it achieving what it intends to achieve through civilian killing?
Thank you, Daniel. To begin with, you mentioned about the website. I we did have technical difficulties getting the current report onto the website, which is why it's only just appeared there. It was published at the beginning of, 4th or 7th of January, one of those. The number of killings, that's only since Abiy Ahmed came to power, and it is less than, certainly less than 20% of the total. We only get a fraction of the information about killings. In areas where we have better coverage, there was a network of human rights defenders in West Wallaga, and they had a more accurate tally of the number of people killed than we get from elsewhere in Oromia. And looking at reports from other sources that I published, we only published about 20 out of 100 that the West Wallaga human rights defenders discovered and reported. And even they say they don't get the full picture. So when I say we've recorded more than 6,000 killings, this is not meant to be an estimate of the total. These are the killings that we have names and places of, largely. And they are almost all Oromo that we get information about. Obviously, there are huge numbers of killings in Amhara region at the moment as well. But I don't get the same sort of coverage there, and that is covered elsewhere as well. The job of the Oromia Support Group is to make sure that we get as much information out there as possible about the abuses that are going on in Oromia. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, for example, has much better connections in Amhara region than it does in the Oromia region. And so they get more reports from Amhara region than we do. The current situation is absolutely dire. Government-controlled militia and ENDF, and in areas adjacent to Amhara region, the Fano forces, especially the government Fano, the false Fano, are committing abuses, killings, burning down property to terrorize the civilian population and to prevent support for the Oromo Liberation Army. The extent of killings is greater than I've seen before, except possibly 1992, 1993, when the OLF were overrun and the TPLF went on a killing spree, killing as many young OLF supporters and members as they could. But even so, the numbers of people that OSG has reported killed in the last 5 years is greater than what we reported in 20 years of the TPLF rule. So the magnitude of the killings is greater, and the extent of them, where they're happening. And as I say, we don't get much information from East Harare, for example, West Harare, or Guji, although we get a little. But the militia are, it almost seems to be random that they're going around and killing young men. If you're a young Oromo lad and ENDF soldiers come across you, then they're very likely to kill you. It's as simple as that. And areas where the Oromo Liberation Army is active, which is now a vast extent of Oromia, then they're even more likely to be summarily executed by ENDF soldiers. We collecting horrible videos of youngsters being taken out of prison and shot. I've been doing a lot of research recently on historical abuses in order to, I'm preparing to write a book. But the killings of the Red Terror are similar to what's going on now, when people were dragged out of prison and just shot and left on the street. And this is happening now much more than I remember, since 92, 93 anyway. And it is largely unrecorded by the human rights community and the NGO community. It's ignored by the world, really. And one thing that I point out in most reports is the extent of the disinformation about the abuses in Ethiopia. The government and Amhara media will point the finger at Ola when in fact it's other bodies that are responsible for the killings. Mainly ENDF, the official soldiers, but there's also a group masquerading as Fano, which is similar to the group that masquerades as Ola. And they commit abuses in the name of Fano, like the government Ola commit abuses in the name of Ola. And this, I think, is a deliberate ploy of the government to drive a wedge between Oromo and Amhara societies, so that you divide and conquer the population of Ethiopia. With a population that's fighting each other, it's a lot easier for the government to control. If the combined liberation forces of Amhara and Oromia cooperated against the government, then it would be perhaps more effective. There is no doubt in my mind that this government is extremely unstable, and it won't be there for very long, I don't think. I can't see it going for more than a few years at most. But it's a very volatile, unstable situation, and the extent of abuses is not appreciated even by Oromo people in the diaspora. It's much worse than what people think.
So yeah, you stated the current Ethiopian government, the Prosperity Party, as well as the Fano militants commit abuses and human rights violations, and they try to control the narrative and try to portray the crime was committed by somebody else. Can you say more on that? Like, what is your observation? How extensive is that? And you mentioned that there are groups that masquerade as Fano militants and commit crimes. And in terms of your report, you highlighted about the execution of the brutal murder of a young boy in Dara a few months ago by the name, I think, Daraje, and he was slaughtered. Yeah, Daraje Amare. Do you think that was committed by the Fano proper, or a group that masquerades as Fanos? And does that group, the fake Fano, have a connection with the government? And what is the relationship? What do you think is the relationship between Fano and the Ethiopian government at this point?
It's all very secretive, just like the government forces that pretend to be the Oromo Liberation Army. They don't live in official military camps. They live away from obvious government support, but they are funded by the central government of Ethiopia, and they're supported by the certain cooperation between government forces and this government Fano, although they don't share military camps. There is another group of Fano which Daniel Gamada described in his visit to Dara in November. He did an 11-day trip on foot, speaking to, I think he spoke to people in 13 villages in North Shoa, in Dara, and he described there being three groups of Fano. One, the real Fano, which fights the army within Amhara region, and two, the government Fano, which operates clandestinely like the government Ola. And there's another group that lives with the ENDF military camps, which are Amhara militia, basically, the local level, people who have connections with the local population, descendants of the Neftenia class. And these people will point out local dignitaries, local wealthy farmers. Oh, there aren't any left now, but they would point out people who had property and produce and had political influence locally. And these are the people then that are targeted by the NDF or by the government Fano group. So three sorts of Fano. There's one Amhara militia Fano, two the government Fano, and three the real Fano, which is opposed to the government. But all these Fano groups are united in their hatred of Oromo. And unlike Ola, which never kills, as far as I'm aware, and I've never seen any reports of it, and never kills civilians unrelated to conflict. Unlike Ola, the Fano groups will target Oromo civilians. A lot of this is in acts of ethnic cleansing in areas surrounding Amhara region. And it's very obvious just seeing where these atrocities are occurring that this is an attempt to enlarge the power base and the control of land by Amhara, by Fano, basically. Unfortunately, these groups are very popular with the Amhara population, just like the OLA have popularity and support from nearly 100% of the Oromo peasantry. But in the Oromo case, my belief and all the information that I've seen is that it's false reporting of Ola against Amhara civilians, but correct reporting of Fano against Oromo civilians. Now, this sounds as though I'm biased, but I have looked at the information as hard as I can, and I've heard even from some Oromo claims that Ola has targeted some civilians, but on investigation, I found no good evidence for this. If you look at so-called massacres that have been, according to the Amhara press, often copied by Western media, you'll see that claims that are made against Ola are unfounded. Even the Karayu massacre of the Gada leaders back in 2021, at the beginning of December 2021, that was initially claimed to be due to Ola, if you remember, from the Ethiopian government. But there are numerous examples. There's a massacre of Amhara civilians in Guliso in November 2020, I think it was. That was initially reported to be due to Ola, but in fact it was the group masquerading as Ola which committed that massacre. Even the Human Rights Commission, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, and even Amnesty International inferred that was due to Ola, and it was not. It was this government-backed or government group masquerading as Ola. Mohammed Hassan has been informed that there's at least 5,000 of these troops masquerading as Ola, and this is from sources within government. It's probably even more than that, I think, judging by their activities. But the Tole massacre that was blamed on Ola, and it wasn't. If you interviews with local people show that it was government instigated. The Agamsa massacre, that was blamed on Ola by the Amhara press, but in fact there were a few Amhara killed, but the vast majority of the well over 100 that were killed were Oromo there. And Fano looted Agamsa after during that atrocity. Right? That was a good example of the ethnic cleansing that's going on in Horogudru and East Warwick. And the Tole massacre. Well, as I said, yeah. Those are the ones that just come easily to mind. There are many more.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So it's a pattern that the Ethiopian government, as well as the Fano militantes, have been trying to create some kind of false flag, committing crimes on people without any compassion, and then trying to blame it on the OLA, and that has been going on over the years, and that kind of mischief has not worked so far, in my opinion. That's my observation, because it has not stopped the Oromo Liberation Army from growing and expanding, and pressuring the government. That's my observation, but you might have the same or different observation. Has the Ethiopian government gained anything from doing that? You mentioned rightly said that the Ethiopian government murdered the Oromo Bagada Karayus at the end of 2021, and then initially blamed it on the OLA. Immediately, its own officials came out and said that was the work of the Oromia regional government and some federal police forces. But no one is held accountable, and lives are lost. People have perished, and families are grieving, but still nobody is held accountable. And this keeps on going on and on. It had recently happened in the where government is said to have hands in the killing of those young people. Why is the Ethiopian government continuing to commit the same crimes when the outcome is not changing, when it's not achieving anything from that?
I think the government is getting increasingly desperate, and the number of atrocities is increasing by the ENDF as a sign of this desperation. It's now getting chaotic and anarchic throughout the Oromia region, with local militia, as you say, behaving with complete impunity and just attacking Oromo youngsters willy-nilly and burning down Oromo properties and destroying, very like the days of conquest by Menelik, really. It's reaching that level of atrocities. The one worrying factor, especially in terms of the future, is the celebration of the depravity by ENDF and by Fano, dehumanizing Oromo civilians. The filming and the dissemination of videos of killings and torturing, the celebration of this sort of depravity on social media by members of the NDF is very worrying, because this sort of behavior is a precursor of genocide. And that has been pointed out by the UN bodies, the ICRI, the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, for as long as they were able to continue their work. And, well, issues. It's very worrying indeed, and an indication of the mentality of especially the Eth and Fano, in terms of the dehumanizing of Oromo people, and therefore the justification of their extermination, as though it's almost a holy purpose to Fano. The video of that youngster who was killed in Dara, he was one of two, by the way, in the same village, who were taken away by Fano and killed at their camp and filmed the killing of Dereje. But if you listen to the soundtrack of that killing, the man who is performing the killing, who is a government Fano member, we believe, he's praying while he's doing it. He's saying, in the name of the Father and the Son, as he cuts into Dereje's throat. He said, we're getting rid of the Gala in the name of God the Father and God the Son. So this is terrifying. The purpose is to rid Shoa and parts of Wolaga of Oromo people, to weaken the Oromo people and their resistance to the government, hence the government and Fano cooperate, and the expansion of Amhara region. And if you just look at the areas that most of the fighting and the killings have occurred, you'll see it surrounds Amhara region. East Wolaga, Horobuduru, North Shoa, West Shoa, and then regions of parts of West Wolaga too. It's a very worrying thing that's going on, and it merits a lot of work in terms of building bridges between Amhara and Oromo communities. Just slinging accusations at each other won't cut the mustard. We have to talk to people in Amhara region who are horrified by these abuses as much as we are, and connecting with those people so that we can jointly decide to develop a society in Ethiopia which respects human rights on an equal basis, regardless of ethnicity. But at the moment, it's, as I say, there are very worrying trends which are pre-genocide in nature.
So, Dr. Trevor, as a person who closely follows the events in Ethiopia, what is your current take? What is going on at this point? We know that the Ethiopian government is fighting with the OLA and has been fighting with the OLA for over 6 years now under this current government. And recently, in the last about 2 years, they also started a war with the Amara militants who call themselves Fano, and the members of Ethiopian National Defense Force who are Amara by ethnicity have joined in large numbers the Fano group, and the war was going on. And currently, what is going on at this point? What do you observe? What is the strengths of the Ethiopian government? What do you observe? What is Ethiopia heading?
I pick up information about military activity only secondarily. As you know, my main objective is to find information about what's happening in the human rights situation. But it seems to me from the reading that I do and the information that I get that the government is in the weakest position it's been in ever since Abiy came to power, and that Ola is growing from strength to strength, despite the extent of the atrocities against the Oromo people who are Ola's support base. So, and this is why I estimate that it won't be many years before Abiy Ahmed falls. But what will be left behind is very unpredictable. I'm quite fearful about Ethiopia slipping into the sort of chaos and anarchy that we saw in Somalia with the fall of Siad Barre in 1991. So my impression is that Abiy Ahmed will not last very long, but that he and his government are working effectively to disable any opposition working at a level of efficiency and fairness after he's gone. His primary objective on getting to power, according to personal testimony of ministers in his government, was to get rid of Kero when he came to power. He said Kero is more dangerous than any enemy that is armed because of the ethos of Kero and its power. And this is why he was concentrating on getting rid of as many Oromo youngsters as he could. And this began at the end of 2018, just a few months after he assumed power. We mentioned the Karayu earlier on, and I should have said that the killing of the Gada leaders was only the beginning. It's the previous report, number 67, included further atrocities committed against the Karayu, and they're being driven from their land near the base of the volcano, the Fantale. And they were displaced to a region between Afar region and the Oromia region on the border between the two. But they have since been frog marched back to the Karayu area, detained again in large numbers, and killed. But they have insisted on the initial ceremony, which took power from the Michile Gada to the next Gada group, that this went ahead. This is at odds with what they were doing before, and it seems that they're trying to clear a corridor between Adama and the coast to this Gada, so-called Gada economic development to the east of Addis Ababa, Finfinne. And they're trying to clear a corridor, a transport corridor from Adama to Djibouti and other places in the east. And they are getting rid of the Karayu. The Karayu have been driven from their land and dispossessed ever since the days of Haile Selassie. But now it's intensifying, and the assault on Karayu society is, well, it could be terminal. It's very difficult to see how they will survive that. And we mentioned about Fano, their power base increased enormously during the war between the government and Tigray, where they were supported, armed, and equipped by government forces, and that is the reason that they're so powerful at the moment.
So you mentioned about the war in Tigray, and the war in Tigray was over now a couple of years ago. What is the status of the Tigray government? Do you follow the human rights situation in Tigray? is the Pretoria Accord holding, and what is the relationship between the Ethiopian federal government and the Tigray transitional government? And in addition to that, and you also included some report on Eritrea and some of the Eritrean refugees living in Ethiopia being attacked. Um, what is going on with that, and who is attacking them? Um, and, and in addition to that, my follow-up question is: you mentioned about the Ethiopian government trying to, the Abiy Ahmed government trying to incapacitate any legitimate party that um, participate in the politics in the Ethiopian politics. And recently, the Ethiopian, it was said the OLF and OFC had some kind of convention, and on which other civic group participated, and eventually they declared the establishment of Oromia National Transitional Government. And the OLF, OLA issued several press releases in the leading up to this convention and after the convention was concluded. The convention took place between February 19 and February 22nd, and then they concluded it by issuing the establishment of the Oromia National Transitional Government. My question regarding that is, um, what is your take? The OLA said that convention was coordinated by the current government, and the purpose was for co-option, so that the OLF and OFC, who are legally operating in the country, can form some kind of alliance with the government, and so that they no longer pose any opposition to the government, any resistance to the government, and so they join the government and they share some kind of, probably get seat in the parliament in the upcoming election, and then they no longer pose any opposition in the government, and the Abiy Ahmed can go to election and legitimize himself and stay in power for the next probably 5 years, 6 years. Um, what is your observation regarding that? Do you think that convention was independent and it was held between only OLF and OFC, or it was coordinated by the Ethiopian government, and the Abiy Ahmed is behind all this national transitional government? And even if it was independent, and how can they, you know, enforce this? Would it be really meaningful, or is it kind of like some kind of exercise that wouldn't bring any meaningful, change in the political atmosphere?
I'm all for peaceful resolution of problems and for the cooperation of OLF and OFC. The government's involvement in this is worrisome because they cannot be trusted at all. But from what I understood of the resolution of their agreement, they insisted that OLA should be involved in the formation of a transitional government. And that seems quite reasonable to me, and in fact it's very important that OLA is involved in any sort of power sharing. But from what I read about that symposium, they concluded that OLA should be part of it. So they're operating under very, very difficult and restrictive circumstances. And they may have been unable to make any more definitive statement about how Ola should be involved. But I'm all for any sort of peaceful solution to the current problems. But I wouldn't trust Abiy Ahmed as far as I can throw him, really. The Pretoria Agreement you asked about, that's all that's occurred there is that it stopped some of the killing and it disarmed the TPLF. And since then, Abiy Ahmed has very successfully divided the Tigrayan administration. Whether or not that division exists amongst the Tigrayan population, I don't know. But certainly the aftermath of the war has not been addressed properly. The amount of aid getting in is paltry compared to what's needed, and the rebuilding of Tigrayan society is being deliberately impeded by the government. It's in their interest. It's typical Abyssinian zero-sum politics. Absolute defeat, absolute victory, and absolute control. And this has been happening in the north of Ethiopia since Abyssinia began, really. It's the whole political system, which is it belongs to the Jurassic period, really. It's not a modern way of conducting a democracy with power absolutely invested in one group only. And we see this, any sort of politics in the Tigray region, Eritrea, and Amhara. It's part of the culture that was responsible for the establishment of the empire of Abyssinia in the first place, which then became the Ethiopian Empire. And it's that system that we need to be fighting. The problems faced by Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia is significant. They're being charged money to even be allowed to stay in Ethiopia, which is horrific if you're impoverished as they are. And the treatment of Sudanese refugees in Amhara region, yes, we have covered that. And there they have been attacked by Fano. And that can only be racism that's doing that. And so Amhara region is not safe for anybody now. If you're not Amhara, then everybody's against you. Sudanese, Agao, Kemant, then you're suffering in Amhara region. And Oromo, of course. And let's not forget that there aren't many regions in Amhara region that don't have an Oromo population. And the Oromo in Walla, of course, have been the subject of abuse and atrocities ever since the days of Haile Selassie. I think that's dealt with most of the things you mentioned there, Daniel. If I've forgotten something, do let me know.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. You touched upon everything that I mentioned. I heard a lot too, and so the convention symposium, whatever it's called, that was held between OLF and OFC. They in their resolution they mentioned that the participant asked both parties to include the OLA in the transitional government, and to to ensure security across Oromia. I think it's a good gesture. It's a positive, but despite it was portraying the OLF OLA as a junior kind of partner in the probably transitional government that would be established. I don't think the OLF OLA would be willing to be in that kind of situation where OLF and OFC would be the government and the OLA would be only peacekeeping. I don't think that would be attractive to the OLA at this point. I think the only strongest organization in Oromia is the OLF OLA, in my opinion. So it is it's kind of posturing that's disproportionate relative to what they can wield, the power they can wield. And that resolution, I don't think there is some kind of mismatch, portraying OLA as a junior partner and only there to protect, ensure peace across Oromia, while the OFC and OLF create the national transitional government. Um, if all this would work, the government is willing to negotiate a real transitional government. I think it should be um, held through negotiation, where there are third parties and mediators, and it should be held in a neutral country, like the negotiation between the OLF, OLA, and the Ethiopian government that was held in Tanzania. And there should be some observers, there should be some kind of enforcement, and those who have the power and capacity to monitor the implementation of what is agreed through negotiation. So if that doesn't happen, I don't know what the intention of the OLF and OFC are in announcing this transitional government. This is the second time that a transitional government has been announced by the OLF. The first one was, I don't think they were ready, they were prepared, and they anticipated what would happen. It only resulted in people being collected from their homes and being in prison, because at that moment the names of the participants were published on websites, and the government got that information and arrested and detained all of them. Um, in this round, there is probably there is expectation that the Abiy Ahmed government is behind it, and it is pushing for this from the position of weakness. And right now, it looks like the government cannot continue to fight the war in Oromia and in the Mara region, and also the relationship with the forces in Tigray is not that smooth. So I think the Abiy Ahmed wants to get out of this quagmire by soothing the problem that's in Oromia, in but that's not the proper venue and a way of conducting that, in my opinion. We'll see what is going to happen. If the government is willing, probably it should start negotiation with the OLF OLA, and then eventually, if it is willing, the OLF and OFC might join and participate in that negotiation. That's my opinion, but I don't think I'm no understanding of where this is going in terms of the declaration of transitional government, and then now they have social media account. They are on daily basis. They are posting stuff content on the National Transitional Government of Oromia website and social media pages. Um, so
agree.
Yeah, before we conclude our conversation, and one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned that the human rights groups are not paying attention these days. And why is the lack of interest in what is going on in Oromia? Yeah, you can comment on the transitional government and OLF, OFC, the Ethiopian government, and that convention as well. I want you to speak to why human rights organizations are paying no attention these days.
Okay. Well, first of all, while we must avoid giving any support to Abiy Ahmed, and we must be very suspicious of his motives, the fact that an Oromia national government has been mentioned, but it's been on the agenda, shows that he is desperate. And he is wanting to create division between Oromo and the north, Tigray and Eritrea. And he wants to mobilize Oromo people to fight his battles against Tigray and Eritrea. So it's a desperate move, and throwing this dog bone of an Oromia national transitional government to the Oromo is a way of trying to appease the Oromo and get them on board. And obviously, we must be completely suspicious of that. But if there is dialogue and planning amongst Oromo, the recognised political parties and OLA, then we should proceed with those negotiations as best we can. A peaceful solution to Ethiopia's problems is the Holy Grail, really. But obviously, we should be very suspicious of Abiy Ahmed and his motives. The silence of the international community about human rights abuses in Ethiopia, I think, is due to their confusion. Their main information comes from people with a bias against the Oromo, and it's largely from northern connections, either Amhara or Tigrayan. And this has been the way ever since Haile Selassie, really, that the West has not listened to the majority peoples of Ethiopia. It's only talked to the people through whose lens they see Ethiopia. And they still regard Ethiopia as being defined by Amhara script, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and starving kids. And that's still the mindset of how people see Ethiopia. And they still regard the unrepresented peoples as being unimportant and not sufficiently educated to listen to. And this has been the result of centuries of bias promulgated by the people who want to see a unified Ethiopia behind the Amharic language and script and the Ethiopian Orthodox religion, which is only a minority view. And that is still maintaining. It's getting better, but so the bias and disinformation is still a very important problem for us, but things are moving in the right direction, although at a glacial pace at the moment, but it's not fast enough. But things are moving in the right direction. And this whole ploy of Abiy Ahmed to unite Oromo behind him and pit us against all the other people in the north, the American Tigray, is a desperate ploy. And the best opposition to the Prosperity Party government of Abiy Ahmed, its abuses, would be for Oromo and Amhara to speak to each other. That would be the most effective way of destroying this evil government.
So we both agree that the current government is now at its weakest, and the activities that it is taking these days, it all indicates that the government is weak and wants to get out of this situation, and either by corruption or through fighting. But it looks like the government is weaker now. And recently we heard the ENDF members have said they don't want to fight, especially in Oromia. They don't want to fight. The military are tired. They want to go back to a training camp. And now we hear about this, transitional government. And then there is a national dialogue that was unable to, bring about any meaningful um, change, bring together the, stakeholders in the previous 1 year or so. And now they extended their mandate by 1 more year so that they can take some time and, work and ensure the government is now safe and everybody is silent, and the stability comes back. I don't think that's going to happen. Eventually we see that the Abiy Ahmed regime has to fall, and so when we say the Abiy Ahmed government has to fall, there has to be some way it has to fall. And what is your vision of that? How do you think that's going to happen in terms of from OLF, OLA, or from any other forces operating in Ethiopia? How would that happen, and how do you view that? What is your um, mental image of the Abiy Ahmed government crumbling down? Would that be OLA, marching on Finfinne and driving the Abiy Ahmed government out, like it happened in 1991 when they decided to leave? Or how else would Abiy Ahmed step out?
Well, I was in Wolaga helping to establish training of village health workers when the Derg actually fell. And then Charlotta contacted us and said, come to Nandi. We walked for quite a long time to get to Nandi then. And I hadn't predicted what would happen there. And I did not predict what would happen to the OLF in 91, 92. And the treachery of the USA and the TPLF was something that I was not expecting. So I'm not very good at predicting these things. And I don't think anybody expected Abiy Ahmed to come to power like he did in 2018. I wasn't alone there to be astounded with what happened and to be jubilant to begin with. Although that jubilation was horribly misplaced, as we've subsequently found out. So I'm not the right person to talk about predicting the future, but Ola is certainly stronger than it's ever been, and it's stronger than the OLF ever were when it was an armed opposition group. Abiy Ahmed is weaker than he's ever been. There is a sense of exhaustion in the ENDF, in the armed forces, and it could all happen very, very quickly. And it may not involve troops going into Finfinnet, or it may, I don't know. I'm fairly sure that the end is not far away, as I keep saying. I don't think Abiy Ahmed's government is going to survive very long at all now. You mentioned about the national dialogue failure, and of course it failed. It's controlled by the very people who are committing the abuses that are making a national dialogue necessary. So it's bound to fail by definition. But once a dialogue is controlled by the stakeholders rather than the power holders, then we'll see some progress. And I think there is such an appetite for getting things right this time that there is a good chance that we will move in the right direction. And the whole ethos of the Oromo Conversation series of conferences is to get this dialogue process, give it some energy and attract ideas outside the usual channels that we normally run in. I'm very disappointed that the planned conference for this weekend is no longer occurring because of speakers dropping out. But this process is what's essential for the future of Oromia and for the future of Ethiopia and the whole of Africa. And the Oromo are the right people to get that underway with our history of democratic and consensus decision making. And once that system gets hold, then stability will spread in the whole of Africa, and it will be the prosperous place that it deserves to be.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor Trueman, chairperson of the Oromia Support Group, for going over the content of your report and your observation about the ongoing situation, human rights handling in Ethiopia and the political atmosphere. And eventually, you mentioned about the Oromo Conversation conference, virtual conference that was supposed to be held tomorrow, but now we have learned that it is postponed. What happened? When is that going to happen? What is the title of the conference, and what is the purpose?
Getting the important stakeholders to talk to the Oromo population and to each other in terms of concrete next steps in promoting Oromo national interests and the interaction with other peoples in Ethiopia. The conference series that's been occurring over the last 2-3 years has been aimed at getting civilized debate and conversation between different Oromo people and different Oromo points of view. But it's been surprisingly easy to form a consensus of Oromo national interests. We've got the consensus now. It's just a question of how to implement it. And this was to be the focus of the conference that has unfortunately had to be postponed because 2 of the 4 speakers could not attend it. we don't want to have half a conference. We want to have all the important voices. So this is what we're going to aim for. So stay tuned. We will get there eventually.
Is there a date set for when it's going to happen?
No, there's no date set yet. This one was in the planning for 2 months. So we're all rather disappointed with the present failure to get it off the ground. But if you give up every time you're knocked down, we wouldn't have got anywhere, would we?
Mm-hmm.
And the Oromo people have been a really good example of the importance of sticking with it and being resilient. The strengths of Oromo society never cease to amaze me. I know things are at a very low ebb at the moment, but the Oromuma is far more powerful than any of us, and it will succeed. It's bound to. It cannot be held back. But it's a question of what we can all do to accelerate the eventual establishment of peace and prosperity in the whole, which is the Oromo's job. Nobody else is going to do it.
Thanks so much, Dr. Trevor Trueman, for taking a time from your early morning today and speaking with Finani's Network and myself. And I hope to get you back again on FNN whenever you can, or maybe most likely before your next report, or when your next report on the human rights in Oromia and Ethiopia comes out. And so with that, thanks so much. Have a wonderful day, and Nagatin, Galatoin.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure as always. The next report should be out in just over a month, and then we can speak again. That's great. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. So with that, we conclude our today's program. Our today's program have been with Dr. Trevor Trueman from United Kingdom, and it was mostly about the Oromia Support Group report number 68. Dr. Trueman and his colleagues reported that the Ethiopian government have murdered more than 6,156 by the time the report was concluded. And the Ethiopian government since then have killed a lot. Even in the last few weeks, the Ethiopian government have murdered a mother and her 2 daughters and another young girl. So the human rights abuses by the Ethiopian government and associated groups in Ethiopia has been ongoing, and it has not subsided. There is a continued abuse of the population. The Ethiopian government have been murdering people, imprisoning people from Hararge. Just last week, the Ethiopian government detained several people in Loa Babur. There is a forced conscription in Jimma. Everywhere across Oromia, the abuse is rampant, and the Ethiopian government doesn't want to stop it, and it doesn't have any compassion on the people, and it commit all the crimes with impunity, and nobody is accountable, and this continues. And with that, the end is near. It looks like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and eventually this regime would crumble, and the population would eventually be free, and hopefully that will happen, just like Dr. Trevor has said. So with that, we conclude our today's program. Daniel Debawa with Symphony News Network. Until our next program, goodbye.